both the parties want to sort of live and coexist like in harmony, but they just don't know how, because they don't speak this language, they don't understand natural instincts or expectations of the other party. That's where I think trainers or behaviorists come in. We sort of help you bridge that gap. If you want to really help this individual dog, you're going to have to really up your people skills. Like, most people join in because they're like, I don't want to work with humans, dogs are much better. But that's the first shift that happens. On a daily basis, I'm talking way more with people, especially when it's a behavior case. I'm talking a lot more and just honing my people skills to communicate with the pet parent, who will sort of necessarily make the changes for the dogs in the dog's life.
But
right?
You're actually running a whole business and you're doing it by yourself. So that puts you in a very niche category of a professional who's actually doing everything, right? So of course, your core service is training the pet, but then you're doing, like you said, you're doing finances, you're doing admin work, you're doing communications, you're doing just people management. Hi there, and welcome to episode 5 of the Pet Central podcast. Last month, we had with us Shalaka from Pet Sitters in Pune, who runs a very successful pet boarding setup, and we saw how much work goes on behind running a boarding setup. What we really took away from that episode was that what we see as pet parents, say until the reception of a boarding setup, is like the tip of the iceberg. And there's a huge mountain of work that goes on behind to take care of our pets behind at a boarding setup. And today we're going to talk to a pet trainer and have kind of a very similar perspective on how much really goes on behind trying to get dog training done successfully. We have with us Shivani Kuthe, and of course we have with us Shobhit. I'm Sagar, and Shobhit, I'm going to hand it over to you to introduce Shivani, and then let's dive right in.
Hi everyone, thanks Sagar. So this is Shobhit, I'm the founder of the Pack.in. And as Sagar mentioned, today we are going to be speaking to Shivani Kuthe, a professional dog trainer who's certified under the Canine Skin Care School of Miss Shireen Dabbar. So Shivani has been a cat mom for a very, very long time. She also fell in love with dogs at a very young age, and we're going to explore a little bit about how that happened during our conversation. She started off, so she's a master's in literature, started off working in the corporate space, but then quickly realized that her actual passion and dreams lie in a completely different field of dog behavior and training. So she then got certified and has been working with dogs for over 3 years now. Glad to have you with us, Shivani. Thank you for doing this. Would you want to, just at the beginning, would you want to quickly tell us a little bit about how your journey with dogs began?
Sure. Okay. Firstly, thank you so much for having me here. I really enjoyed your previous podcasts. And yes, I think like it is for most, surprisingly for most dog trainers also, my relationship with animals, with dogs especially, I was very scared of dogs growing up. I also had this very bad incident where this bunch of like street dogs sort of attacked me in the middle of night, and it was traumatic for. So this was around when I was in 4th or 5th grade. So after that, I was just keeping my little distance from them. Not that like I hated them, but it was just that fear, right? But it started off with how when I found my cat, which again was not the plan. Having an animals was never on the agenda, but we found this cat. She was sort of abandoned, and there were kittens involved, so I had to sort of take in, right? And with growing up with cats is how I sort of also started to see how amazing it could be if you once sort of just open up yourself to that connection with like cats or any other animals for that matter. So that's how it started. I rescued these kittens when I was in 7th grade. So that was like a long time back. So after that, it's just been exploring and more about the animal kingdom and like all these different connections you can sort of make. And there's so much to learn even in dog world, right? So it's just been about that.
That's fantastic.
Amazing. And sorry, Shobhit, if I may ask, you told us a lot about cats. You also told us you had an experience with dogs, which made you fear them for a bit, and rightly so, I guess. How did the love for dogs start then? So was it that you started getting okay with cats and then dogs also happened, or what's the story there?
Yeah. So I'm Marathi, and in Marathi we have this phrase called "माणसाळले." No. So which basically means getting domestic, like, we say like a dog who's come into a house is now domesticated and now can live around humans, right? So my cats did that for me, for like, on the inverse, they got me used to
Okay.
like dogs and having cats around, and like just the whole concept of it's okay. There's not a lot to be sort of scared about. It is strange, like making that first connection, or like seeing dogs and actually going beyond thinking of them as, let's say, stray dogs or pet dogs. There is a lot to that also, but it's my cats who sort of got me into seeing this and being friendly. And then, of course, there was another dog that I ended up rescuing because he just needed it. So I had to do that. And that's how I was like, okay. At first, even then, with that first dog, I was terrified. I wanted to help him, but I was also like, he's going to bite me anytime. Like, I just need to be so careful. But after that, he saw, and then you know how dogs are, and it was an indie. You know how loyal and loving and everything they could be.
Yes.
So from that one dog, it started off, and I realized, oh, like there's no going back now that there's you sort of transcended into this world. There's no going back and not looking at dogs and wanting to learn more about them. So yeah, it was the cats.
How lovely.
Fantastic. Very interesting.
Yeah. And then, so would you say that, your initial experience with your cats and then with all the rescue dogs that you had gave you a sense of, life's calling with animals around you?
Yeah.
Right? But as I understand, you went on to study literature in college, then went on to work at reputed companies. Uh, what pulled you back in? Because that's your traditional path to building a career, right? Like today, when we talk about building a career, we're thinking IT, or we're thinking analytics, or we're thinking banking. All of these are the traditional paths, right?
Yeah.
Uh, so, was there something that happened during your corporate journey or your professional journey that pulled you back into the world of dogs and animals?
Mm, I mean, yeah, certainly. I mean, I think it's common for all of us. It was the pandemic that was a big sort of shift. But even before the pandemic, like I was well settled. Like I'd done my masters, I was at IBM, and I was settling in at the job and getting the hang of it and the corporate life and how it's supposed to be, right? But there was not enough of sort of getting that satisfaction that you get from what you do. So
Sure.
for me, like for some people, like jobs can be just jobs as well, right? But for me, it was very specific that if I'm going to spend 9 to 10 hours at doing something, I need to find more satisfaction doing it than compared to just like meeting numbers and this, right? It should have a connection. And animals, even besides that, even in my journey, that have had a parallel journey with animals where it was just, oh my god, such cute dogs, to like actually like learning first aid and working with NGOs, to fostering, to learning dog walking. So that had been a parallel journey. So like that transition to sort of like a more professional, now let's take this up seriously, was a lot more easier for me because I had been doing it on the side, even like in a besides a stereotypical way of life, right? So yeah, it
So
was around the
essentially,
pandemic that
got it. So if we understand, you moved from part-time taking care of dogs to then moving full-time, and
yeah.
then in that journey, Shivani, how did you decide to kind of formalize this, right? So I understand you've trained with Shirin Dabar ma'am, and what was that? What prompted that decision then to say, okay, no, you know what, I'm doing this part-time and through passion.
Hmm.
How do I formalize this, and why now?
Yeah. So even when I was at IBM, I was starting to look at like even on weekends, I just needed, because I also shifted from I'm born and brought up in Bombay, but I shifted to Bangalore, right? I was here without my cats, without my STDs. So that 9 to 5, even in that IBM, this weekends I was already sort of I learned how to pet sit and dog walk, and just because I wanted to spend time with animals. So that thinking of it as a career or also as something that you can make into a profession was an idea that was already in my head even when I was at corporate sort of this. So when I sort of moved like into like during the pandemic, I was like, okay, I'm not like I'm happy with my job, but I'm not getting that level of happiness. That's when I started exploring other, like in terms of dog training and like behavior, all of these sort of fields that I can work towards. And I actually wanted to work with, this is such a funny story because one of the names that came up was John Rogerson. Like this is the person you go
Right.
to who works with positive reinforcement. I love his philosophy, and he comes to like India sometimes, or you go there and study. So I was prepared to do that, except when I messaged that email ID, they told us that, oh, he's not going to come to here anymore, but his student sort of teaches. And the person who was telling me all of this was Shirin. So I was sort of like, oh my goodness, like later when I look back, I was like, oh my god, I was talking to Shirin at that point. But she was the one who sort of guided and told me, and it really sort of helped because she was very realistic in what this profession looks like. Like from the get go, from day one, she told me, you need time. You like even in terms of finances, how you're gonna manage clientele, setting up your base. It's gonna take, like she said, very realistic expectations. So because of that, even when I transitioned full time to dog training, there was 1 year, I think 2021, where I was doing IBM and working like with the pack
Interesting.
also, and setting up my own base in Thane. That was a very tough but productive year, I think.
Sure.
So that's how the transition happened. And then finally, I was like, no, this is sustainable. This is something I want to do. And then I shifted, I think, 2021. By the end of it, I quit my job and moved to Bangalore and started setting up here.
Yeah, and what I would love to know is, you talked about how difficult it is because as a dog trainer, you not only have to think about the dogs that you train, but you also have to set up a professional practice, right?
Yeah.
So, could you also tell us a little bit about how a day in the life of a dog trainer looks like? Like, you can go into as many details as you want. Like, how does it start and how does it end?
Um, Definitely. I think the one thing, a lot of people who join in dog training or like start working with animals or like in these professions, they're all dog animal, like lovers, right? Like who love animals and they want to work with that. The first realization you need to have is, as much as if you want to really help this individual dog, you're going to have to really up your people skills. Like most people join in because they're like, I don't want to work with humans,
Yeah.
dogs are much better. But that's the first shift that happens. On a daily basis, I'm talking way more with people, especially when it's a behavior case. I'm talking a lot more and just honing my people skills to communicate with the pet parent who will sort of necessarily make the changes for the dogs in the dog's life, right? So that, first of all, that is was a big shift or like big sort of learning for me. I needed to sort of work on that. So obviously dog training by itself, that one skill is just one part of this job. There are so many different aspects that you need to sort of keep in mind and work, because once you're a dog trainer, you're setting up your own brand, you're setting up, you want to establish, and you want people to know you for the work that you do, right? There's going to be no backups like in corporate worlds or anywhere. You need to establish yourself. So you are like a one man army, or your own like social media, you're your own sort of setting up your own SOPs and all of these finances, CA, you're all of that for this one person. And it's like, so dog training just becomes one of the skills that you need in this whole sort of setting up your journey. But yeah, and that is, I mean, personally I struggle a lot with like certain aspects. I'm better
Sure.
at some other. But it's a
Sure.
journey of like covering all of these bases and continuously growing, if you talk about it on like a higher scale. Yeah.
Of course, I think what you're saying, Shivani, I think makes a lot of sense, and we discussed this with Shalaka as well in the previous episode. Externally, it just looks like, okay, you're working with dogs, you're training dogs, but you're actually running a whole business, and you're doing it by yourself. So that puts you
Yeah.
in a very niche category of a professional who's actually doing everything, right? So of course, your core service is training the pet, but then you're doing, like you said, you're doing finances, you're doing admin work, you're doing communications, you're doing just people management. And yeah, this is very understated, where you say that working with the clients is perhaps the most challenging part of the job.
Yeah, honestly, I mean, because I think it becomes a skill later, but for people who join in, like I said, are usually people who
Exactly.
are more introverted, who love animals more than this, right? So this becomes a real challenge for everyone to sort of set up. And then you'll meet different kinds of parents. And I think it's a privilege for us as dog trainers and as sort of people who work in this industry, that we get access into this, like into really intimate life parts of
True.
people's lives, and they give us that, and I really appreciate that. But you need to be mindful about it. You need to be mindful about people, how they will learn, how they'll actually understand, like maybe like setting up habits or whatever changes you want. It will be, you need to base that on that person's personality also, and you need to get your
True.
messages across. Our main sort of job is always to advocate for the dogs. Like at some level, I feel like we work as just translators for what the dog is trying to say. So even
Correct.
in those terms, making sure that they understand, you're getting across to the pet parents in a way that they'll also accept it. Sometimes it's also that, right, that there are issues and the pet parent doesn't want to make those
Sure.
changes, so convincing them. So a lot of like people handling again, yes, uh big role, I think. uh yeah.
That is actually very interesting, Shivani, that you said that dog trainers are like the translators of dogs to humans, right? Could
Hmm.
you delve deeper into this? Because uh, unfortunately, at least 3, 4, 5 years back, most of what I thought of dog training was that it's about teaching a certain set of commands, and then have your dog robotically repeat those as you ask them to, right? And you had all these concepts of military dog training and police dog training, and then you had police dog trainers come down and teach all these commands every day for like 6 days a week, right? That's basically how at least I, in my very naive way, used to look at dog training, and that is why I felt I don't need dog training. I don't want to prepare for any competition. I don't want to prepare for any dog show. So why do I need my dog to listen to certain commands? So could you dive deeper into that concept and tell us exactly why training is important, and like what exactly is the role of a trainer for a parent?
I mean, yes, definitely, like you said, and I think you guys sort of brushed upon it in your first podcast as well. The relationship that we share
Correct.
with our dogs has changed so much in the past 10 years, and it's just going to get more intimate, right? When we had, when training was sort of like an additional luxury or something that you do for your dog, was when the dogs also didn't live that close to us. They lived outside. Now we're asking this sort of animal who's used to so much of freedom and so much of just following their own instinct. Like that's one thing that most dogs or animals, that's the one thing that they have, right? They've been ingrained to sort of so like perform certain behaviors, and they will do that. Like that's one instinct that they have. Now bringing them into this house, into our apartments that are so sort of already so getting smaller and smaller, and in that also half the furniture, half beds, sofas, they're not allowed in. You're restricting this, and it is like I was having an interesting like conversation with Dipti from For the Love Dog yesterday about our dogs are essentially captive animals. Like, even if I have to put it slightly bluntly, they are living in this. There are certain rules. They can't do a lot of behaviors that are natural to them, right? So now the expectation for them is so much more higher. Like, it's so many things that we're expecting out of them. And like, we are also like, even the pet parents are coming from a place of love and affection and wanting. So there's this little sort of a little gap in between where I'm like, both the parties want to sort of live and coexist like in harmony, but they just don't know
Sure.
how, because they don't speak this language. They don't understand natural instincts or expectations of the other party. That's where I think trainers or behaviorists come in. We sort of help you bridge that gap. We sort of help you, like I said, advocate, understand your dog's needs, communicate your needs and expectations, set boundaries that you want for your dog. So we act as that little sort of bridge between pet parents and uh, like the dogs. So that, I think that is the main sort of role that we play, and it's going to get more and more. I feel like the more and more we are getting dogs at home, the more intimately they're like, there are babies now, right? It's like, it's not just a dog, and dog's
Yeah.
not a gali. There are babies. So even from that perspective, the more intimate it's going to get, there's going to be no more boundary setting, more communication. More than that, it's going to be a lot more about education and awareness about all of this, right? Like currently we are hand holding, because we are in such a sort of a nascent stage of like pet parenting culture in India. um, it's going to grow higher after this, right? So that education awareness needs to also happen. So that's another thing, I mean, that I do at the pack. That's my job at the pack, right? Just creating all of that things, education that parents need. But as trainers, behaviorists, yeah, coming back to that, that's what we do. We bridge the gap, we set expectations. This goes beyond sit and down, and like those commands are basically like what used to be the major part of training back then. It's just
Sure.
one of the tools that we use now. We have so many other tools that we use, and sitting down just becomes a way of one of the ways we communicate.
So, Shivani, it's very interesting how you say that today stuff like sit and stay and down are the most, say, basic elements of training. Because when I had trained my previous pet, which was about now 17 years ago, maybe,
Oh wow.
all of this made for the whole core of the training, right? That's what they said. We'll teach them sits, etc. I want to understand, of course, from a trainer's perspective, this has changed. Trainers have evolved in their knowledge and information. How much of this change has reflected with the pet parents as well? Do the pet parents now come to you asking or with the expectation that you will teach sit, stay down, or are they coming to you with a slightly more deeper expectation, or from the whole training exercise?
I think it's a mixed bag, honestly, because at some points I do have people who come in and like my dog should do this, and do namaste and all of that. And I'm like, sure, but your dog is like clearly pulling on the leash, barking at the door. Wouldn't you want help with that? But anyway, but like that is one sort of, yes, I do get like people like that also. But there are it's. I mean, I really am so glad to see there are so many more like a bigger generation like I see who are coming up who are learning all of this, like what it takes to sort of raise a dog
Sure.
happily, socialization and everything. And they come up and they talk to me in the same terminology that we use, which is like
Fantastic.
so like gratifying that okay, they know what your like their
Right.
dog needs, right? And they just are coming to sort of get that help. So it is building, it is slow. A lot of times they will come to me and they'll communicate in a way that I understand that okay, this dog needs to be socialized or confidence building. A little bit of that has to happen, but
Right.
from their side, the way they'll say it is maybe not in that same way, but like you get it.
Makes
So
sense.
that
Makes sense.
realization of what it takes to like it is slowly seeping in for sure with pet parents today.
That's super interesting. Now, Shivani, I mean, you have been working with parents and their dogs for a very long time, right? Um, would you have some really fun stories that you could share with us about how it is that training really happens? Any quirky stories of parents asking for specifics of training for their dogs? Anything that is interesting that our viewers would love to know more about, and even we would love to know more about.
Oh man, that's so putting me on the spot. I don't know about funny stories, but like again, training. I mean, so this one that always I remember is this family. Again, very quick fun story. Okay, who had called in, who had met like this was in back in Thane, so they had in Runwal Estate actually. They had met
Oh,
like a lot
okay.
of like trainers that had gone through for toilet training for their dog, who was also again a Saint Bernard and like a GSD mix, which is just insane to think about.
Wow.
And the again in a sort of a narrow thing. So that training worked. I did not believe it at all. I just thought he was like a Saint Bernard mixed with like an indie perhaps, but he did grow up and show like again Saint Bernard and very GSD like features and behaviors once he grew up. So
Right.
in like a very small apartment with like parents who are older. Uh, Thankfully, though, like basic training, he's doing pretty well. But I remember for him, they had gone through several trainers for like toilet training, and it was just not happening. And they're like, he's just not doing it, and where he's supposed to, which was in like a bathroom. And I was like, okay. And that was just when I'd started off, and I felt like I'm not prepared. I don't know. They've gone through so many trainers. What am I going to do? And this was in the pandemic, so it was online mostly, but experienced trainers nevertheless, right? So I ended up
Right.
going because they were so close by. I did end up going to their house. And they're like, okay, he's doing it, he's toileting right outside where we want him to, right outside that bathroom. And it's really annoying and it's unsanitary.
Mm.
And why can't he do this? And we have paid so much. And I was listening in and I was listening and I was like, oh, that's the door. That's where you want him to go. And I was like, they were like, yes. And he just doesn't go. And he was like this tiny of a puppy, by the way. I was like, fine. Throughout the session, the door was closed, like the bathroom door was closed.
Mm.
And I was like, so I was trying out techniques, again textbook techniques. I was trying out for the first time, make your puppy run, take them to that place. And I realized, why is the door not open? Like, how is it's like, no, like they were like, the keeping the door open is going to be so unsanitary because our kitchen is next doors and everything. And I'm like, how do you expect this tiny of a puppy to go, like he's almost doing it at the mat, right? But you, how do you expect him to go there, open the door, or I don't know what the
Correct.
expectation is, and go in and pee? Like the whole that whole issue
So
with
as
this
a
was just, it was just like
sorry,
honestly
as a dog trainer, you're literally opening doors to good behavior for pet parents. Interesting.
exactly. And it was just that, and I was like, that was such a sort of, again, I was prepared with everything, right? It was one of my first sessions. So I was like, all these toilet training methods and everything that I can do. And it was just about telling them, hey, no, your dog can't open the door. Your dog can't, like, sort
Just
of, you
open the
can
door.
teach him
Yeah.
to signal, but he's too tiny. You need to just keep the door open. And in 2 days,
Yeah.
the dog was peeing already. And it was like, sorted. So that I still remember that as like, in again, you need training skills, you need to be updated about all the latest sort of things that are coming in, but sometimes just common sense also really helps in like when you're training and working with dogs, because dogs
Sure.
are also so like they're very, there's just black and white, there's no sort of gray, or they're not thinking about things in
Sure.
like with a lot of complexity. It's just, I need to pee, give me a
Okay.
place, you're not going to give it, I'll just do it somewhere else.
Okay, that's really interesting. So you essentially just had to open a door, which solved a lot of the major problems. Any other stories? Perhaps not as funny as opening a door, but do you have anything else for us?
Um, I mean, yes, definitely. I think this case was very interesting and was very sort of close to me also, to my heart. So this was one of the first cases I had when I moved to Bangalore, which was this indie who was really just like terrified of everything, right? The fear levels were so high inside the house. He wouldn't step outside, like even like in the backyard, in like the front yard of their house. He was too terrified. You would see him panic, howl, bark, like barking at anything that was coming across. So really sort of high levels of stress. And me as that time I'd just done my training and not my behavior course. So I did feel like I was sort of a little like, in over my head with that one. But we took it like really, really slow. And like, it was just at that point, again, by the time we ended it, the progress wasn't too much. Yes, he was now starting to go out, but he was just fearful, still as fearful. And all these other sort of parameters that we set for ourselves as trainers, that your dog should be like, once you
Sure.
train a dog, you should go from A to Z. Those were not met in my head, and I was really sort of honestly disappointed in myself. But like, over, I just reconnected with them like the other day. It was his birthday. So this dog is now just absolutely amazing. Like, he goes out for like he wouldn't step out, he would be shaking in the car. He's going out for like car rides and like for journeys. And it started off with me asking them to just, hey, take him to Starbucks, get him a cappuccino, get him used to that. But now he's going on car rides, he's traveling around. And there are so many sort of other changes. Like, even when I met him, like even during the training sessions, he used to be sort of scared. He knew he could trust me. He didn't have that sort of courage to come across to me and like interact.
Sure.
He recognized, he came running, and it was so heartening to see like sort of the progress that they had made. And like the fact that I could, at that point, I didn't feel like it when I ended the like the training sessions, but I could see all the difference that I could sort of help contribute and make this dog and his pet parents sort of life slightly better. So I think that is like the most gratifying experience. And of course, in training and behavior, it takes time. Like, you don't, it's not something that you see
Sure.
100% by the end of it. But like, to see now 1 year later, there's proof that this dog is doing so much more, like he's happier and like healthier, and all of his other gut issues and everything is like subsided. It was so gratifying to see. So
That's fantastic.
it's just like a very personal and very sort of uh, story that's very close to me. And I was so glad, I recently just met him, right? So I was so glad that happened. But yeah, this is ways in which I feel like we
Yeah, no,
can
I'm just
help. Yeah.
very interesting. So I'm just going back to very early on in the podcast when you said for some people a job can remain just a job, and that's great. But for people who operate from a place of passion, this is what really helps you sleep better at night, right? So this
Exactly.
kind of gratification and satisfaction from doing such good work, and I'm sure most of us who are in the pet space come from a place of passion, and we feel this way, and I think we sleep well at night. Shivani, to kind of wrap up on today's podcast, this has been a lot of fun. As a final kind of question, we'd love to uh, love to know from you what's a message, a couple of lines maybe that you'd like to put out there to your fellow trainers.
um I think firstly, I'm very blessed because I've joined in this industry where I just meet like the most brilliant and the most sort of compassionate people. So firstly, so glad to be part of this, and it's a growing industry. There are more and more trainers coming in, more like dog loving, compassionate people. So firstly, it's so part to just be part of this gang. Besides this, I don't know, I feel like it's such a sort of helpful community as well that we have in terms of like trainers, and like there's a lot of solidarity that I see across. So really sort of thankful for that. Otherwise, I feel like another thing that defines trainers today is that they have to be always growing, and these people are always learning and always upskilling themselves to like no extent. Like I know senior trainers who are still going out for courses and doing like just learning and being on top of
Right.
their game. So just that is like a prerequisite, I think, for this one. So even for young trainers coming in, you have to keep your mind fresh and sort of always active. But yeah, that's it. No sort of messages, but just so thankful to be part of this community.
It's
That's
lovely.
lovely.
Lovely to know and lovely to have you with us, Shivani. This was a really, really interesting talk. I'm sure that everybody who's watching got to know a little bit about, the dog trainer's life and what it looks like. And clearly, it doesn't look to be as straightforward as we all thought, right? It's not just about the commands, it's about so, so much more. So as we go through these episodes, I think we're learning more and more how working with dogs is a lot of fun, but at the same time, it's not a joke. It takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of different skills, a lot of openness to learning, as Shivani you rightly said, and also being able to do X Y Z more than just working with dogs. I think
Correct.
this is eye opening for a lot of us. Yes, Sagar.
No, absolutely. I'm 100% in agreement with you, Shubha.
Yeah, yeah. So I think this was it. Thank you, everybody, for watching. We hope that you took away something from today's episode. This was a lot of fun, and we hope that you had fun too. Till the next time, we'll hope to see you soon. Come back and check in a couple of weeks or 3 weeks from now, and you will see our next episode on the Pet Central podcast right here on the channel. If you love this, please do subscribe and like and share it with anyone else who likes or plans to become a dog trainer soon. We'll see you again. Bye.
Bye
Bye
bye.
bye.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Shivani.
Thank you.